It says we're live.
Indeed, we are live.
We're live!
Welcome, everyone, to the return of the TechForge podcast. This is our first episode for 2019, episode 26 in total.
What?
Yep.
Half a year? No.
Yep.
We've been doing this for 6 months?
We've been doing it for 6 months. Well,
That's
technically 6.5 months because we took 2 weeks off. But
oh, how dare us.
yes, how dare us want to spend the holidays with our families. Well, we do have quite a bit of tech news to catch up on, and given that CES 2019 is literally right around the corner, with NVIDIA's keynote being Sunday, January the 6th, and it is January 4th when we're recording this, we're going to have some juicy CES 2019 speculation as well. So,
you know, in light of the holidays, Ned, I have a special surprise for you.
oh, is that so?
I heart you, Ned.
Aww.
So what's up?
Not too much. I enjoyed spending some time with the family around Christmas and New Year's. I actually managed to pick up a couple of random tech deals while I was at my parents'.
Nice. What'd you get?
I picked up a Gigabyte AH68M board, a micro ATX FM2 socket board, an Athlon X4 860K.
Nice.
And a CPU cooler. All for about $60.
You gotta be kidding. That'd be a nice kind of play around with, you know? Like do a little tweaking.
Yeah, I've got a little 450 watt power supply that'll be perfect for it, and a low power graphics card to pair with it.
Nice.
It'll make a solid little daily driver rig.
Yeah. Plus you can overclock it a little bit, you know, you can tweak a few settings here and there. That's what I like about those older AMD platforms.
Oh yeah, they're fun to play with, and if you break it, you're not out that much money.
Right. Well, at worst, you just got to probably reset the CMOS or something. I mean, got an aftermarket cooler, and
right,
you know, you'll be fine. Just a quad core. It's not like an 83 something.
Right. It's if it's like the other Athlon APUs from that time period. Of course, this one doesn't have the integrated graphics, so I don't think you can call it an APU proper. But if it's
yeah. Right.
But if it's like a lot of those from that time period, you know, for daily driver stuff, it'll be just fine. It'll struggle a little bit in some of the heavier workloads because it's basically a slightly fancy dual core.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I understand. Excavator, you technically used CMT that had 2 integer cores paired with a single floating point unit to technically make it a quad core. But the reality is the fact that it only had a single floating point unit and the way the cache was put together meant you wound up with some latency issues.
Well, it had 2 floating point units, didn't it?
Right. It had 1 floating point unit for every 2 integer cores.
Yeah.
That was the whole shared resources thing.
This is our variant of hyperthreading.
Pretty much. Never mind that Intel tried it with NetBurst years earlier and it didn't work. So,
otherwise lovingly referred to as NUT burst.
Yes. Having once been the proud owner of a first-gen Northwood Pentium 4.
Oh, yeah. That's going back a ways.
Yeah. Socket 423.
Rambus RAM, right?
Yep.
I built a few of those systems. It was kind of tough on a couple of those early chipsets to get that Rambus running just right.
I remember how amazing I thought it was that it had 128 megabytes of RAM. I mean, that was ballin' in 2001.
I couldn't get over the frontside bus speed, 800 megahertz.
Mm-hmm.
And then the RAM was super fast too. I don't remember what frequency it was running at, but it was faster than anything else at the time.
Yep. Oh, well, we do have a lot of stuff to cover tonight, so let's not spend too long reminiscing and jump right into it.
Okay.
We'll jump into some of the shorter tech news because there is some more long-form speculation and rumors we're going to talk about. But a few relevant things, and this one's just popped up in the last day or two. The article we'll be using is from WCCF Tech, but it's all over the financial news if you've been following even slightly closely. Apple recently had to lower its financial expectations for Q1 of 2019, which did not do its stock any favors. WCCF Tech puts it here as Apple crash triggers bloodbath for US and EU semiconductor system. So,
yeah, I saw the headline, but I didn't really read it because it was Apple.
well, let's put it this way. Apple's value of its stock since October 6th of 2018 has fallen 37%.
Well, I know that some of that's blamed on the iPhone performance.
Right. And part of the reason that they had to lower their projections, their expectations for Q1 was because of slow Chinese acceptance of the new generation of the iPhone 10, combined with their ongoing patent war with Qualcomm.
Ah, I wonder if the current political tariff agreement's got anything to do with it as well.
Yeah, that plays a role too. But the fact that they had to lower their expected revenue from 38.5% to 38% on their gross margins, that doesn't sound like that much. But remember, Apple is a $1 trillion company. So 0.5% of gross margin adds up to millions of dollars.
I'm sorry, I'm just not sad to see this, honestly. For a company that treats their customers like they do, you will not see me shed a tear.
I mean, I can't really blame you. If there is any good news, it is the fact that over today, Apple did gain back about 4% of its value day to day today, and closed at $148.26 per share, down from the low yesterday of $143.62 per share.
Well, I hate to say it, but they're going to do just fine.
Yeah,
unless I mean they could, the way they're structured and everything, they could have some massive issues and still not really incur too much of an issue as far as their stock value goes.
And the thing is, the shaken confidence in Apple also shook confidence in several other tech sector mainstays. Of course, this was written yesterday, but at the time when the article was written, NVIDIA was down 5.18%, AMD was down 7.33%, and even Intel was down almost 4%.
Yeah.
They've rebounded a bit today. NVIDIA at end of trading today is up 6.41% from yesterday. AMD is up 11% from yesterday. And Intel is up 6.14% from yesterday. So it looks like it was a very temporary hit, but it was significant.
Yeah, I think Intel stock is probably going to be stable. NVIDIA is going to be up and down for the next 6 months probably, as they try and get through all their Pascal issues and their RTX issues.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about NVIDIA's stock woes a little later in the program, along with the fact that they're getting sued.
Oh, yeah. Well, when your stock drops about 50% in about a month, you're going to have some mighty angry investors.
Yeah, they might get just a little bit ticked. So, stock market, especially in the tech sector, is volatile as always, but just even the tiniest things can lead to these massive sell-offs like we saw with Apple. So I don't think any of these companies are going to have anything too much to worry about. I am a little bit worried about how it'll affect the broader tech sector. But I think, especially with CES right around the corner, I think they'll probably be okay. AMD's got some big announcements coming up. It's basically an open secret at this point that NVIDIA is planning to launch the RTX 2060 at CES.
Oh, that's right. Like all 10 versions of them?
Yeah.
However many
we'll talk
versions?
some more about that in a little bit. But,
oh, my gosh.
And apparently Intel is going to, for the first time in generations, release a line of chips without an internal graphics processor called their KF series.
I saw that. That looked actually pretty interesting.
Well, we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. So they all have something in the near future they can use to buoy their stock price.
Mm-hmm.
So Apple, maybe if you treated your customers a little better, your investors wouldn't be so ticked with you.
Oh my gosh. It's one of the few companies that can treat their entire customer base badly and probably raise in stock value. I don't know any other company like that. Even the car companies had to completely, revitalize their customer bases, like GM and Ford, where for decades they told the customer, no, this is what you want. And then you had Toyota and Honda that were constantly listening to their customer bases, and look at what happened. Like Toyota pretty much took over. I wonder why. Make your customers happy.
Yeah, it's such a seemingly simple concept, but there's so many companies that just they don't seem to get it.
Right? And then Ford started doing it, and guess what? They didn't need help in the bailout.
Oh, careful. You're getting close to politics there.
I know, right? You start talking about cars and tech, like, yeah. Then you're getting into religion and politics.
Oh, boy. It's the slippery slope indeed.
Yeah.
Oh, getting back on track, this next one's from TechSpot, and it's, USB-C is probably one of the best things that happened to the USB protocol ever.
I'd agree to that.
And so I'm glad to see that they're constantly keeping it updated. A USB Type-C authentication program launches to prevent against hardware hacks. So apparently there was an exploit for USB-C and the USB-C protocol that would allow random code execution. And so basically what they have started doing is that the USB Implementers Forum has added a new program called the USB Type-C Authentication Program to set standards for improved security.
No.
And so basically under this authentication program, OEMs would be able to certify their devices as being hardened against most current attack methods. I mean, a couple of years ago, you'll remember when then President Obama met with Vladimir Putin in Russia, the Russian delegates gave them USB phone chargers that, when disassembled, turned out to be data collection devices.
That's hilarious.
And so basically what they're looking to do is they want to use 128-bit encryption for authentication to verify that there's not been any modifications made to a device. Basically, each manufacturer would have a key that they would use, a public key that they would include on their, so that when you plugged a USB-C device into your computer, it would ask for the authentication key. It would compare them using a 120-bit, 8-bit encryption algorithm and ensuring that it matches what the original manufacturer's key is supposed to be.
And it's all done in the hardware and it's seamless. So
yeah, basically you would see nothing. Of course, with any new technology, there's always when you add more points of failure, things are more prone to fail.
Yeah, like water cooling fittings.
Yeah, I know you have some experience personally with that.
Well, not yet, but I will. Huh?
Yeah, look at that pile of water cooling parts. Lord, forgive me for my jealousy. But anyway, you know what? It's a good thing. USB devices are one of the easiest ways to maliciously attack a device, simply because when you plug in a USB device, if it contains the appropriate malicious code, you can basically get it to run whatever you want.
Well, yeah, but then at that point, you've already bypassed probably several layers of physical security just to get to the machine that you're trying to hack. Right. Unless, I mean, I don't know, unless it's a consumer-based machine, which aren't really heavily valued targets anymore.
Well, and you also, from the enterprise perspective, you also have to consider the inside man attack from your own employees or from, say, a disgruntled former employee.
Yep. That's why upfront vetting processes are so important.
So if it works as seamlessly as they claim it will, then it's only a good thing. If it doesn't, well, I'm sure we will see many more stories about it in the future.
Yep.
Speaking of security actions that can be a real pain in the rear, Microsoft apparently doesn't think you should have an administrator account on Windows. Well, specifically the administrator account. Yes, the built-in one. And so the latest version of the Windows 10 October 2018 update, as it is increasingly inaccurately named, will disable the local administrator account if it finds it is active on a given machine when it updates. Now, I can understand from the perspective of Microsoft. They're thinking if the average Windows user who is not technically savvy has activated the built-in administrator account, they probably didn't mean to, or it's probably been activated maliciously to run code that it shouldn't, which are fair assumptions to make for non-enthusiast users. However, for power users, sometimes there are some processes that can only be run from a built-in administrator account, or there may be a very specific set of programs or a specific reason you have to use the built-in administrator account. And so to just randomly or just to disable it by fiat, I think is a very wrong move.
It's extremely wrong. You're going to make a lot of users pretty angry. It seems like every major update, they make a big part of their user base angry.
Well, I mean, you have to consider when you basically own, I think, what is it, 85 to 90% of the computer operating system market on the desktop. When you're covering that wide a range of people, you're going to make at least some portion of them angry with some decision you make.
True, but But in the last year or two, especially, it just seems like a lot of their decision, or a lot of the way the updates have been occurring, don't even take the customer into consideration one bit.
Yeah, they do seem to be taking an increasingly, this is the way you're supposed to use Windows, and that's how you're going to use it approach.
Which is really not the right attitude to have. I mean, remember not too long ago when we were talking about how they were using their customer base as unknowing alpha and beta testers.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, the whole B, C, and D updates thing, where if you were a conscientious user and decided to check for updates like you're supposed to, guess what? You might get beta updates that might brick your machine.
And it's not hard to label alpha, beta, or later updates.
I mean, the whole point of the Windows Insiders program was to be that people who had normal Windows would have the mainstream updates, the stable updates. And if you were a Windows Insider, you could choose whether you wanted the slow ring of beta updates or the fast ring of beta updates. So that kind of in this view of almost a rolling release model that I thought was a good idea at the time for Windows, because there's a lot of advantages to have a rolling release model.
Well, it's continual updates. You'll have a domestic audience that is tech savvy and most likely responsive. So if an issue does occur, they will quickly get back to you and communicate what those issues are, and you can quickly fix them so that eventually you get your updates to where they're pretty stable and you can put them into the slow ring of updates.
Exactly.
So,
but it looks like Microsoft isn't even honoring that decision-making anymore. And if you just happen to be a conscientious user who pushes the wrong button, congratulations, you're now a beta tester.
And being a software tester by trade, that just makes my blood cringe a little bit, man. I mean, testing and validation has come a long way in the last 10 to 12 years. And it's very fast and responsive now. There's no reason for that kind of behavior. No reason. You can still be very quick and responsive and put out very good quality code and not behave like they are.
Yeah.
I'm getting off my soapbox, but yeah.
Speaking of testing and updates, this is kind of an aside story. It's probably not something that's mainstream tech pressy, but it was something that impressed me, because I don't know if anyone else follows Wendell over at Level 1 Techs, but he's more of a Linux guy, but he does do a lot of Windows testing. And, several months ago, we had the story about how the Threadripper 2990WX was seemingly memory bandwidth limited. And while that's still mostly true, Wendell wasn't convinced by that explanation for some of the performance regressions he saw in some of the rendering software that he was using on Windows, because he was not seeing the same regressions in Linux with the same programs, which is what led him to think it must be an issue with the Windows scheduler or something else in the Windows kernel. And so after months of testing and actually going out and buying an EPYC 7551 CPU, which is basically the same thing as a Threadripper 2990WX, only it has access to 8-channel memory instead of quad-channel memory, and finding that it had the same performance regressions under Windows, despite having that 8-channel memory, meaning it wasn't just memory bandwidth.
It was
He came up
scheduler.
with a video, and he produced it. We'll include the link in the article links down below, and also a link to the article where he discusses the problem in depth. Basically, what he discovered is that Windows Scheduler gets really, really dumb when you have more than about 16 cores.
Is it 16 cores or 16 threads?
Well, it's not even necessarily 16 cores. Where it gets dumb is where with Threadripper above the 2950X,
Okay.
because you have 4 chiplets on the same die.
Did you say chiplets?
Well, that's basically what they are. They're chiplets.
Yeah.
You
Sounds
have
like chewing gum.
Yeah, you have 4 8-core chiplets.
Yep.
What he found was happening was when Windows would go to start up a given process on the 2990WX that loaded up most of the CPU cores, it would actually spend most of its time, about half of the CPU resources, on just shuffling threads around, because it kept trying to assign CPU thread affinity, trying to assign threads and processes to the same CPU cores over and over and over. So it was constantly having to shuffle threads around. However, he worked with one of his friends from a software company to create a program that he calls Core Prio, to basically reset the suggestions that the Windows scheduler makes, and it fixes the performance regression problem.
Interesting.
He goes into a lot more detail in the article, but the short version is that it has to do with NUMA, non-uniform memory access. Threadripper uses 4 NUMA access nodes. Windows Scheduler is designed around 2.
Oh. Wow. Wow.
And apparently, the code that Windows uses for scheduling was designed around 2-socket extreme core count Xeons that use at most 2 NUMA nodes, whereas Threadripper and Epic use 4 or more.
Wow.
So basically, it turns out, yes, the problem was Windows all along. Now, that doesn't mean AMD is completely absolved of the issue here. They should have been working with Microsoft to figure this out on their own and try and get the scheduler fixed.
Well, who knows really what happened behind closed doors, you know?
I mean, that's fair. But at the same time, the fact that it took an enthusiast like Wendell working with software companies other than AMD and Microsoft to figure out what was causing the issue and how to fix it means that there's somebody dropped the ball somewhere.
Oh, yeah, that's a big ball too. I mean, look early on. When Ryzen was first introduced, it was a young platform, probably a little rushed. You know, people were complaining about performance, and it wasn't long before we had a custom power profile within Windows. The Ryzen balanced power plant. And that fixed a lot of issues and increased performance in a couple of workloads. And I want to say that was introduced probably within 3 months of Ryzen 7 and 5 initial launch. So we've had Threadripper 2990WX for what? 6 months now, roughly?
More or less.
4 to 6 months, somewhere in there. Yeah, that's a pretty major ball to drop. That's a pretty major ball to drop. I wonder how many people bought the 1950X or some of the other more lower end SKUs because of that.
It's a fair question to ask, which, by the way, part of the reason the 1950X doesn't suffer that problem is because it only has 2 active CPU dies.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's only 2 NUMA nodes for it to use.
NUMA nodes. That's so fun to say. NUMA nodes.
Yeah, it sounds like something that should be on, you know, some type of technobabble for a sci-fi TV show.
It does, like Mork and Mindy. NUMA nodes, nanu, blah, blah, blah. You know, and when you look at level 1 tech, Mr. Guy, you gotta love him because he's sporting a turtleneck in the video.
Yeah, Wendell cares not for your fashion trends.
And he doesn't care. That's fantastic. Gotta love that.
So on from the 2990WX to something a little more mainstream in the CPU line, Intel has listed a series of, as Steve from Gamers Nexus puts it, F SKUs.
Yeah, I saw this. This was really interesting. I wonder what led them to do this.
My guess is that they had a lot of processors that passed validation on the CPU portion but failed for the internal GPU.
Mm.
So basically, what makes these KF or F series processors different is they're identical to the other 9000 series processors, but they have their internal or their integrated graphics processor, the IGP, turned off or soldered off. And so that's why I say I would bet that they were having yield issues with the integrated graphics on the 9000 series, and that's why these are getting released to try and help ease the supply strain.
Yeah, it very well could be.
And, you know, these KF series, unless you're using a workload where Intel's QuickSync technology is going to be useful to you, which there are some. The QuickSync codec for streaming is actually pretty decent.
Well, there's streaming, potentially. There's also
Adobe Premiere.
Yeah. Premiere is probably one of the main focuses of QuickSync right now.
But if you're not planning to use a QuickSync workload, for gamers in particular who are more focused on gaming performance and are probably going to be using a discrete GPU anyway, this KF series, particularly if they are cheaper than the full K series SKUs, they could be an appealing value proposition. I remember back in the Ivy Bridge days that the Core i5-3350P, which was essentially a Core i5 3450 with the integrated graphics processor turned off was really popular. And even in Skylake days, I believe it's the Core i5 6402P, which also had the integrated graphics soldered off, was popular among OEMs.
Yep, I remember those days.
So these new F-Series SKUs, you know what? The one that's most interesting to me, honestly, is the i5 9400F, because we've not seen a 9400 non-F SKU.
Well, it's locked, right? So it does boost up to 4.1, which is decent.
And the fact that it's a 65-watt part.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
but that I mean, power-wise, it competes directly with the 2600. The Ryzen 5 2600, but I wonder how well it does against the Ryzen 5.
well, it does have 6 fewer threads, but it does have far higher clock speed, in theory.
Well, the 2600 will boost up to 3.9, but it has a higher base clock.
Right.
The 3.4, I think. I don't know. I guess it depends on pricing. If that and workload, I mean, if you're not needing the higher threads for whatever reason, and the price is significantly cheaper, which I would find that highly suspect, because you could get the 2600 for, I don't know what current prices are, but used to be you could get it for about 160. I don't know. I don't know. That is an interesting part, though. You're right. 65-watt TDP.
Let's see. Right now, the Ryzen 5 2600 with the Wraith Stealth cooler is $165 from Amazon.
Case in point. And you can do an all-core overclock of probably around 3.9 to 4. Well, I don't know. Wraith Stealth. That'd be pushing it quite a bit. Probably
yeah, I think for that
3.7.
kind of overclock, you're probably going to need, even if it is a cheap aftermarket cooler.
Well, you'd probably need a $30 tower cooler.
Yeah, something like a Cooler Master Hyper 212 or a MA 410P or
a GAMX 400.
Yeah.
I think the GAMX usually slightly out or beats the 212 out, but it's so close.
Oh, that reminds me. I should have included that in the hardware deals.
So,
the Deepcool GAMX 400 is currently $16.99 at Newegg.
Are you serious?
Yep, I should have included that in the hardware deals, but I did not. I will have to go back and correct that mistake.
Even at full price, that thing's a baller cooler, man. That thing's a baller budget cooler.
I mean, yeah, I purchased a Hyper 212 Evo for $10 used this week, but
Nice.
for brand new for $6-7 more.
Yeah. Well, I've purchased both, and both are fantastic coolers. You know, I've got the GAMX on my daughter's 4-year-old FM whatever APU, and that easily fixed their cooling issue. And then I've got the Hyper 212 Evo downstairs on my dad's i5 4690K.
Yep.
And I mean, it's running stock, but still.
And I'm using the predecessor to the 212 Evo, which was the Hyper 520N.
That's a decent cooler too.
I'm using that on a 2600K. So
That's
And
right
it's,
around what, a 90-watt TDP, somewhere in there.
yeah, I think, and right now it's overclocked to 4.4 gigahertz.
Yeah. So you're probably pushing 100 watts, probably. I'm guessing. It's not
Close
bad.
to it.
That's not bad.
All right, I've added that to the sets of links that we'll include down below.
I really thought about maybe buying a 9900K or 9700K. I can't. I thought about it, man. I can't think. I really can't think of a reason. Ryzen's better.
It's definitely the better value.
Exactly.
All right, let's see. Well, that is all of our quick stories, our short stories. So we'll move straight on from the tech news into our first topic for the week, which is, of course, there has been a lot of speculation these last few weeks centered around AMD's Ryzen 3000 series, specifically some of the leaks that came from Adored TV, and that seemed to be getting some confirmation from other places across the internet, while other sources are claiming, this isn't what our sources are telling us. Meanwhile, there's also some Vega 2 and some Navi leaks. So, this first article from Tom's Hardware was written January 2nd, and it mentioned that AMD Ryzen 3000 series Matisse processors, which Matisse is the code name that's being used for Ryzen 3000, that these CPUs were listed at a Russian price checking website called eCatalog.
Oh yeah, I remember. I remember seeing YouTube videos about this very thing.
And so
Yep.
the information that was listed was right in line with the information that was in the Adored TV leak. Now, there have been several sources that have come out since and said that it's bunk, that these are basically placeholder listings, and they're just using the Adored TV specs until the real ones come out.
Well,
Again,
it's very much a copy and paste.
yeah, it definitely seems like it. And I think regardless, keep in mind, these are leaks. And leaks, by their very nature, should be taken with a huge grain of salt. Leaks could be coming from any of a number of different sources. Heck, even companies will sometimes leak their own information to gauge audience and internet reaction to those leaks to see whether they're on the right track with something.
Or even scarier yet, what they should be pricing their stuff at.
And I think that's been kind of the point of contention between, in particular, the big standoff, as it were, that seems to be developing was between Adored TV's fan base and Hardware Unboxed, which Hardware Unboxed, they do some excellent work. Steve and Tim, Steve does some great benchmarking. Tim does some excellent review work with laptops and monitors.
It's true.
And they are sticking to their guns and saying the Adored TV leak does not match what our industry sources are telling us. And you know what? I appreciate them attempting to temper those expectations like that. On the other hand, they also said the same thing about there's no way it's going to be RTX anything. And they kind of haven't recovered from that egg on their face.
That's funny.
And so, don't get me wrong. I don't think there should be any fight or any beef between those two entities. But at the same time, I think when you throw it out there that, this is wrong, and then it's shown that you're in fact the one who is wrong, you might want to be a little less forceful about denouncing a leak.
Yeah, well, it still won't stop them. I mean, they're going to do what they feel is right, and they feel very strongly about their current opinion.
Well, we also have another leak, this one coming from WCCF Tech, which, again, whatever your opinion of WCCF Tech, they claim AMD will be launching Ryzen 3000 series CPUs, APUs, and a Radeon GPU at CES.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of speculation as to what that Radeon GPU will be. Some seem to think that it'll be Navi. Others seem to think it'll be a Vega 2 at 7 nanometer.
Right, because AMD has taken trademarks out on both of those. Vega 2 and Navi.
Really? Oh, maybe they'll surprise us with both.
So that's going to make for some very interesting information.
Well, if it's going to be Vega 2, it'll run, it's going to be a big GPU. It's going to cost lots of money with the HBM to make. It's going to be expensive. It'll perform really well. I mean, if you look at Vega 64 now with current drivers, stock speeds, at 1600 megahertz, that thing is between a 1080 and a 1080 Ti in terms of performance. Closer to the 1080 Ti. But it eats a lot of power and it runs hot. So, I mean, you know how much I love Vega. I have a Vega 56 and I absolutely adore it. But that's because I'm a PC enthusiast and I like to tinker. I like the fact that I have 3 different types of BIOSes I can flash on the thing. And after I Wasser cool it, I'm going to be able to really open her up, even though I'm gaming at 1080p, right? But I don't know. I kind of think Vega 2, it'll be great, especially at 7 nanometer, probably run at 2 gigahertz, which would really put it, I would say, probably close to maybe 2080 Ti, somewhere between 2080 and 2080 Ti. I mean, that's 4,000 something stream processors at 2 gigahertz, right? That's such a baller GPU. But it's going to be eating a lot of power to do that. Where right now people are wanting affordable, low TDP, low heat, silent, good performance for a cheap price. So that's where I think Navi's really going to be or have potential. But whatever happens, CES is going to be amazing. I'm hoping for some great stuff. Whatever happens. I don't know.
Indeed.
I don't know. I think for them to really steal some headlines, they'd have to break out some sort of GPU that has 2070, or slightly better in performance for half the price.
Right.
If they did that, that is shaking up the market. And I'm kind of stealing what another YouTuber said here, but I completely agree with him. If they take the approach that they took with the first gen Ryzen, right now, they've got a great opportunity to really shake the market up. Because remember what first gen Ryzen did? They came out with that 8-core 16-thread CPU at half the price of the HEDT. You know, in some cases at like a third of the price. And they just absolutely shook everything up. And it's doing great. They're selling like hotcakes right now. And in the GPU sector, they're having some struggles. Yes, they're extremely competitive at the mainstream, you know, at the $200 and below that, but they need something at the high end that people will buy. Now they've got high-end GPUs that perform very well, but they've got a bad rap. You know, they need to perform at 2070 or better, be half the price, and have a very good TDP. That's what they need to do. I hope that's what they do. We'll have to wait and see.
And speaking of further confirmation that we could be seeing AMD GPUs and CPUs very soon, is that there has been some changes to the in-development Linux 4.21 kernel. Now, the latest Linux kernel right now that's available is the 4.20 kernel, which released, I believe, on December 23rd. And so Linux 4.21 is expected to release officially before the end of Q1 2019, but more likely is going to release in the next month or so.
Oh, really?
But in particular, this article originally came out on the Phoronix page on Christmas Day, but apparently AMD is getting out ahead in that the original Zen CPUs, the original Ryzen and EPYC CPUs, did not have temperature monitoring under Linux until months later. Well, apparently they're getting it in the kernel for Zen 2 ahead of time in the 4.21 kernel. In particular, there was this change to the AMD-NB changes portion of the log. Updates to the Data Fabric System Management Network code needed to get K10 temp working for M30H. M30H being the ID for Zen 2. K10 temp is an older utility designed to give temperature readings on, you guessed it, K10 and newer AMD CPUs. And we're also seeing other Zen 2 Linux patches that have come out, including an improvement to compute support, a new AMD GPU FreeSync Adaptive Sync support patch. Let's see. Support for the always on preferred mode for AMD systems. And support for the AMD Audio Coprocessor 3.x in Raven Ridge systems, as well as other new sound hardware support in the 4.21 kernel. So there's been a number of patches released And so all those patches mean that Zen 2 is probably not that far away.
Yeah, it kind of hints at that, doesn't it? Huh.
And when we have on top of that AMD announced a couple of days ago that their keynote will be used to announce, quote, next-gen products. Apparently, Lisa Su was not willing to get any more specific than that.
Well, weren't the last one or two CES? I don't know if they had a keynote, but when they had mentioned something during CES, it was they had given some brief hints, or they had shown the product, but they didn't come out until March or April. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know.
Basically, what happened is the CES News blog interviewed Dr. Lisa Su and she said, quote, we will be making some exciting announcements about our next generation products at CES 2019. But of course, the interview cut off there with the obligatory watch the keynote next week. But they also, there's some other interesting quotes in that Lisa Su said that this keynote would be, quote, a major milestone for AMD, as well as the fact that they would have some, quote, very special guests on stage from the many different industries that we work with.
Cool.
So, dropping all kinds of hints, but not really giving us a whole lot of actual information.
Well, I mean, supposedly they're going to be the first to market with 7-nanometer CPUs and GPUs. So, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll definitely see.
Hmm?
We'll definitely see what happens.
Well, they've got, and I mean, as far as timing goes, they've got, right now is the time for them to make a move. If they're going to make a move, right now is the time. With a struggling NVIDIA and a struggling Intel, if they really want to make a move and capitalize on it, right now is the time. Because it won't be long before Intel is releasing a series of GPUs, before Intel is on a new process node, because they're making investments now. NVIDIA will likely rebound from RTX as soon as they figure out all their supply chain issues. It might take 6 months to a year. I'm betting that it'll be around 6 months. But right now is the time for them to capitalize.
Yep.
Because they've got unbelievable momentum from Ryzen first gens, and plus their CPU division is fine. But it's their GPU division I really worry about. They really have to nail it.
Yeah, it's almost funny how it's a direct flip-flop from where those two divisions were 5 years ago.
It is, actually, now that you say something about that. Because their CPU at the time, I think, was Pile Driver. And I had one, I loved it, but it wasn't competitive with what was currently out on the market.
Yeah, it was a fine budget option, but... And at that time, that would have been the time period of the R9 290, R9 290X. And those were excellent GPUs.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, when, the 290 and 290X, which, yes, had reputations of being space heaters.
But they were, if not the fastest, they were extremely competitive. Because what did NVIDIA have out at the time? The 700 series lineup?
Yeah, the R9 290 traded blows with the GTX 770 and 780. And the 290X would at times trade blows with the 780 Ti.
Which I believe at the time, AMD was not able to completely optimize the hardware that they had. So they had to kind of over-engineer the hardware. Whereas NVIDIA had good hardware, but they had much better driver support. Well, the difference is being AMD optimizes their architecture much better over time, whereas NVIDIA will GIMP their older lineups and optimize their drivers for whatever's current. So
Yeah, that what was the old line? AMD fine wine technology.
yeah, and it's true. It's true. Look at Polaris benchmarks now versus what they were like when they first debuted. Look at Vega now versus what it was like when it first debuted. It's a night and day difference. It really is. Look at benchmarks of the Fury now. It's still an extremely competitive card because they've just tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. The architecture is not that much different between Fury to Polaris to Vega.
And the truth is, they've been utilizing the underlying GCN architecture since the 7000 series. The 7970 was the first with GCN 1.0, and then you had the R9 290 was GCN 2.0, and then basically you had third gen GCN with the 390, and then with the 4 and 500 series, you've had a couple of iterations on GCN 4.0.
Mm-hmm. Because now they're seeing where Pascal cards are starting to get a little gimped because RTX is out, and they're optimizing drivers more for RTX than they are for Pascal.
Speaking of RTX, let's take a look at AMD's main graphics competitor, NVIDIA.
Yep.
So it's pretty much an open secret at this point that NVIDIA plans to announce the RTX 2060 in their keynote on January 6th before the official start of CES, probably hoping to steal some of the thunder from AMD's keynote on the 9th. And so there's been a lot of rumor and speculation and leaks about the RTX 2060, and apparently its partner card, the GTX 1160. And so what we have available, it is supposed to be the RTX 2060, apparently is supposed to be the cheapest ray tracing enabled card, and is supposed to have performance roughly on par with the GTX 1070.
Well, from what I've read, it potentially could be nearly on par with the 1070 Ti, actually, because the cores themselves, the CUDA cores, actually have better IPC than Pascal. Pascal. So even though they've got the same CUDA core count, so 2060 has what? 1920 CUDA cores or whatever?
I
Same as the
believe
1070?
that's the leaked. Yeah, the leaked amount for the 2060 is 1920 CUDA cores, 240 tensor cores, and 30 ray tracing cores.
Well, when you take an RTX card that has the same number of CUDA cores as a Pascal variant, and you take them down to the same megahertz speed, the Turing card actually has better performance. So there is a bit of an IPC gain with the newer architecture that NVIDIA's got out. So from what I've read, the 2060 could very well be in the 2070 or 1070 Ti realm of performance.
And that would make sense, particularly with the fact that they're also, if the leaks are to be believed, releasing a GTX 1160, which uses a different die that does not have ray tracing cores on it. And if this is the case, then apparently this GTX 1160 will have no ray tracing cores and slightly less CUDA cores than the 2060, but we price matched to the current 1060.
The problem is, though, they're going to be blasting the mid-range with product SKUs.
Yes.
I saw it somewhere. They're going to be having 3 and 6 gig variants, but they're going to have 3 and 6 gig variants at DDR6, DDR5X, DDR5.
Oh, yes. Apparently, Gigabyte on Christmas Day registered a whopping 39 different RTX 2060 models with the Eurasian Economic Commission, and included 3 different tiers of 2060s differentiated by the amount of VRAM they had. 3 gigs, 4 gigs, and 6 gigs.
Why? Why?
And in addition, divided further into cheaper GDDR5X and faster GDDR6 variants.
It's 2019, people. There's no reason you should have a 1080p card that's got 3 gigs of VRAM. 4 gigs, that's really pushing it. For a $200 to $300 card, 4 gigs of VRAM, that's like a big no-no in my book. I mean, it's bad enough. 6 gigs, okay. Fine. I get that. All right? That's the same as the 980 Ti. Okay, fine, whatever. You know? But 3 to 4 gigs? 3 gigs.
Yeah.
4 gigs, I'm not happy about. But, like, 3 gigs? Come on.
Yeah, the GTX 1060 3 gig, when it launched 2 years ago, was only a good value because of the cryptocurrency boom.
Yep.
And the fact that no one could buy a GTX 1060 6 gig. Which, by the way, the fact that they called the GTX 1060 3 gig a GTX 1060 in the first place is a travesty of marketing.
Show me a AAA title in the last 2.5 years at 1080p, ultra settings, maybe even high, that's not over 3 gigs of VRAM.
Exactly.
A 2060 is more than enough GPU to push 1080p ultra.
Yeah, if it's 1070 Ti performance, it should be pushing 1440p ultra.
Yeah! A 1070 is adequate for 1440p. Like medium to high. You're going to be just fine. 60 to 80 frames per second. Most of the time. Just fine.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
A 2060 can do that. But you have to have 6 gigs of VRAM.
Right. It should be either 6 gigs or nothing.
In my opinion, it should be higher than that. But still. Why? Why? That's ridiculous. They're just going to blast the mainstream. And they're just going to be confusing all sorts of poor people.
I mean, it was already bad enough with the 1060. And people are asking, well, what's the difference between the 3 gig and the 6 gig? And having to explain why there's a difference in the number of CUDA cores and why there's a difference in the memory bandwidth. Your average user is just going to go 6 gig better and go spend the money.
Well, it's kind of technically right, though, because you get slightly more GPU and a lot more VRAM with the 6 gig. But you're gonna have a lot of people that say, "Oh well, this one's a lot more inexpensive, so I'll just buy that," you know. And then they run into frame buffer problems because it's constantly kicking textures out to main RAM, or worse, the SSD. Like, why? That is special needs marketing.
Well, there is some things to take solace in from some of the leaks we've seen. The most reliable leak we've seen was a Geekbench entry that had an RTX 2060 GPU with 6 gigabytes of VRAM, 30 compute units, and a boost clock of 1200 megahertz, but that was for the mobile variant.
Mm.
And so there's been a couple of other leaks as well. The RTX 2060 leaked in the Final Fantasy 15 benchmark, which is a terrible benchmark, by the way, but that's a completely separate issue.
I don't know why they keep using that as a reference.
But anyway, apparently the RTX 2060 in the Final Fantasy 15 benchmark database performs around 30% better than a 1060 and about 6% worse than a 1070. But the 1070 had an advantage in that this was at a 4K setting. And having more VRAM, the 1070 naturally was able to cope with it better. In addition, the RTX 2060 was seen in the ashes of the Singularity benchmark database, where it achieved a very 1070-like performance of 49 FPS at the 1440p crazy setting.
Crazy. That's funny.
Yeah. Ashes of the benchmark, it's not ultra, it's crazy. That's what they call the setting.
That's just silly. It's silly time.
Apparently, a Taiwanese laptop manufacturer, CJ Scope, revealed that the Mobile 2060 has a maximum boost clock of 1620 megahertz and a base clock of 1320 megahertz.
That's not bad.
For a mobile variant, not at all.
That's probably a pretty baller laptop right there if you get it with like an i7. That's pretty baller, actually. As long as your expectations are realistic, like, okay, I can play this for 1080p, like, all day long. Okay.
Exactly. We have another leak, this one from Video Card Z, or Video Cards,
Dude.
saying the RTX 2060 will cost $349 USD.
That is ridiculous pricing. That's a few bucks less than what the 70 part should be. That's ridiculous.
So according to this leak, again, the RTX 2060 will feature 1920 CUDA cores, 240 tensor cores, 30 ray tracing cores, 120 texture mapping units, and 48 rasterization operations. Or rasterization operators, excuse me. And so a boost clock of 1680 megahertz will be the same for Reference and Founders Edition cards, and is supposed to offer Reference comparable performance to a GTX 1070 Ti. In particular, at 1080p, they expect 90 FPS in Battlefield 5 with ray tracing off. In Battlefield 5 with ray tracing on and DLSS off, they expect 65 FPS. And in Battlefield 5 with ray tracing and DLS both on, 88 FPS.
Well, if you have enough cooling, any of these cards will boost up to 2 gigahertz, honestly.
That's fair.
Just
And apparently, the card is expected to be bundled with either Battlefield 5 or EA's Anthem for free.
I mean, after owning both the 1060 and the 1070 Ti, I know that the GPU boost for NVIDIA's products is usually way higher than the listed or advertised boost clocks. My 1060 routinely went up to 2 gigahertz on its own, and the 1070 Ti was usually playing right around 1900 megahertz. So these cards will, and I've seen lots of reviews and real time reviews where the Turing cards are doing right around 2 gigahertz as long as they're cooled properly. Water cooled, I've seen them go up as high as 2100. So yeah, I could definitely see 2060 doing 1070 Ti levels of performance, as long as it's got the V buffer to do it. That's going to be its ultimate Achilles heel.
But wait, RTX 2060 is not all that's leaked. The next level down card, the GTX 2050 or GTX 1150, depending on how NVIDIA decides to brand it, also leaked out, this time from WCCF Tech, although they're using Tomb Apisac as their source. He's been fairly reliable, though. But from what they got from his leak was that there was a new NVIDIA CUDA card with 14 simultaneous multiprocessors, 14 SMs. That's lower than any of the other currently known cards. And so 14 SMs would correlate with 896 CUDA cores, which would put it firmly in X50 territory.
That's a big gap. They're
Apparently,
going from 896 CUDA cores to what?
1920.
Yeah. That's 1,000. That's a huge gap.
Well, remember, there's probably going to be a GTX 2050 Ti in there somewhere. That, if I had to guess, will probably be somewhere in the 1,200 to 1,400 CUDA core range.
Are we going to be seeing 40 product SKUs from NVIDIA?
Well, how many did they have in the 10 series?
I don't know. 20?
It was
around 20.
Yeah, it was. I was going to say, if we tried to enumerate them all, it was something like you start at the bottom with the GT 1030 DDR4 and DDR5 versions. Then you have the GTX 1050, the 1050 Ti, the 1063 gig, the 1066 gig, the 1070, the 1070 Ti, the 1080, the 1080 Ti, and the Titan X Pascal, the Titan X Big P, the Titan X Little P, and the Titan V.
You know what, Ned? It's crap like this. I don't like to be labeled as a fanboy, but it's stuff like this that makes me a fanboy. I love AMD now. I'm serious. Like, if you need a specific kind of card, okay, I need 1080p Ultra. All right, I have $200 to spend, no problem. 580, boom. Okay, I have $300 to spend, and I either want 1080p Ultra or or baseline 1440p. Okay, no problem. $590. All right. Well, I have $420 to spend, and I want 1440p performance. Okay. You can either get the Vega 56 or the 64. That's it. That's it. It's so simple.
Yeah, if any of these filings are any indication that for there to be so many RTX 2060 SKUs and to be what looks like probably at least 2 SKUs out of the 2050 series, it's just you reach a point where you can only saturate a market so much.
I know. If you were coming into this completely green, not knowing anything, you would need a fifth of whiskey, probably a couple of 2 liters of Diet Coke, a full stack of migraine medication, and about 3 days of no sleep just to research everything within your budget range for a computer build, for gaming. If you're strictly even looking at NVIDIA, let's leave AMD out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go 2 months from now, that would be that totally green shopper who actually does research and uses the power of the Google. They would need all of that. And if they were in a state that did recreational marijuana, would probably need some of that too. Just to deal with the massive migraine they're going to get after no sleep and research.
For the record, CrossForge Gaming does not endorse any of these activities.
Thank you, Dad. It's just preposterous, man. It's just ridiculous.
Speaking of ridiculousness,
oh no,
NVIDIA has a problem.
No, don't do it.
They have a stock problem.
I know where you're going.
And it made their investors kind of mad.
Kinda?
Well, when your stock loses 58% of its value over a 3-month period, it's kind of a big deal. And so
it's 58%, Ned?
58%.
Oh my gosh, last I heard it was 43. Wow.
Now they have, it's basically NVIDIA stock has been pretty much in free fall since the launch of the RTX cards, kind of flopped. And, well, the investors, not being happy, were told by NVIDIA that they were, quote, the masters of managing the crypto GPU market.
That's what I was waiting for right there. Quote, masters at managing. Wow. Yeah.
They had claimed to their investors that any drop in the GPU market in demand would not hurt their business. Except the bottom fell out of the cryptocurrency market, and suddenly NVIDIA had a back inventory of literally millions of GPUs.
Yep.
That they unloaded on their AIBs, who have since glutted the market, which is why some believe that NVIDIA has held off on launching the RTX 2060 as long as they have, in order to ensure that they got rid of the glut of GTX 1060s they created for the cryptocurrency boom. But now is having to be marketed to gamers and enthusiasts.
That's why we're seeing stripped down 1070 Ti, 1080s, and 1070s as 1060s, or one of
Right.
those.
The new GDDR5X variants of the 1060 are actually defective 1070s, essentially.
Which let me say something here. There is no trend of overclocking for the 5X variants, which makes them overclock or tweak any better than the standard 1066 gig variants.
Indeed.
There's no trend. They are locked down by the BIOSes that are loaded on the cards. They will only consume so much power. So, unfortunately, all that potential that you have with 5X and the bigger VRMs on the PCBs, because they are using reference 1080 PCBs in some cases, which allow them to do up to 300 watts of power, if not more, they are locked down hardcore by those BIOSes. So, yeah. That's why we love the Vega. Anyway, did I say that? Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Mr. Ned.
So, to give you an idea, if you look up NVIDIA Corporation stock, which, hold on, I'll share this because the visual speaks for itself.
Is it a line graph?
Oh, it is a line graph.
I can't wait to see this.
All right, and present to everyone. So this is the line graph of NVIDIA Corporation stock over the last year. You can see things were pretty steady and slowly growing through the year up to about October the 1st or so of 2018.
Masters at managing.
Where the stock crested at $289.36. You can see afterward it fell off down to about $185 and temporarily crested around the beginning of November, but then quickly crashed back down again. And right now is sitting at $136.19. Which, by the way, is up $8.20 from the low yesterday. The low yesterday of $129.
Buy it. Buy it now.
So when I say they've lost over 58% of their value, I'm not kidding.
Here's your chance, AMD. I'm telling you. Here's your chance.
So, the point of that being, because of this, the Shaw law firm has started a class action complaint. It's not technically a lawsuit yet, but it is a class action complaint against NVIDIA for investors with losses in excess of $100,000. So,
probably quite a few.
Most certainly. Reading directly from the Shaw law firm here, which I might as well show this to you all as well. Here is the actual information from the Shaw law firm. This is all publicly available. According to the complaint, the company made false and misleading statements to the market. NVIDIA touted its ability to monitor the cryptocurrency market and make rapid changes to its business as necessary. The company claimed to be, quote, masters at managing our channel, and we understand the channel very well, end quote. NVIDIA also claimed to the market that any drop-off in demand for its GPUs amongst cryptocurrency miners would not negatively impact the company's business because of strong demand for GPUs from the gaming market. Based on these facts, the company's public statements were false and materially misleading throughout the class period. When the market learned the truth about NVIDIA, investors suffered damages. So, if you were an investor in NVIDIA Corporation and you lost over $100,000, you can join this class action lawsuit through the Shaw firm. Their number is right there if you're interested. I kid, but...
Yeah. You know what's ridiculous? They release RTX 2070 with prices up to and over $650 in a lot of cases. 1080 Ti MSRP was $650.
Mm-hmm.
Shame on you, NVIDIA. Shame for putting those cards priced way so high. I remember when I went to Best Buy and I had purchased a GTX 770 2 gigabyte for about $380. Yes, it was overpriced, but I thought I was getting a decent deal at the time. Fast forward to now, $670.
By the way, I should mention, I'm not attempting to unfairly pick on NVIDIA here. AMD has been hit by a bit of the tech slump as well that we talked about at the beginning with Apple and Intel and several of the others. Mm-hmm. And just to prove my point, here's the same graph for AMD. Actually, while I'm thinking about it, I'll pull it up for Intel as well. So AMD, currently their stock price is at $19 a share. Nowhere near NVIDIA's. But in September of last year, September 14th of 2018, their stock crested at $32.72. So they've been feeling a bit of the pinch too, but nowhere near the losses that NVIDIA has suffered.
Do you know where it was at one point in 2015?
If I remember right, it was around $1 a share.
Yep.
I really wish I had bought in then.
Oh, I know, right? Put $1,000 in or so.
And for Intel, if we do the same 1 year graph, we can see they crested around June at $57.08, but they're still at around $47.08. So they've been not super stable, but relatively so.
Yeah, they'll be fine. I mean, they're such a giant gorilla. They're going to respond and take back market share.
Exactly. The Intel will be fine.
Yeah. I think by 2020 they're going to be very, very competitive because they'll have more revenue streams coming in, especially with all those pretty smart GPU guys that are working there.
I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? We've made it through all the tech news articles.
No!
But we're not quite done. Because we have some hardware deals this week.
Okay.
One of them that we mentioned earlier in the program. Honestly, I should just keep sharing my screen at this point. So, that I mentioned earlier is the Deepcool GAMX 400. This is a solid budget air cooler, usable on practically all platforms, including AM4. This model has been updated for model AM4.
Yep, and actually this usually does as well, if not slightly better than the Hyper 212 Evo.
Exactly.
Which if you get either one, you are not in a bad realm as far as cooling goes. They're both very good. Very good coolers. And for this to be $17, this thing is a steal.
Yeah, so if you're stuck on a stock CPU cooler for your rig, this is a cheap and easy upgrade.
Yep. As long as your TDP is around 100 watts or less, you'll definitely be getting a great cooler here.
And if you're basically running any of the mainstream chipsets or any of the mainstream CPUs, barring some of the higher end stuff like the 9900K or the Ryzen 7 2700X, this cooler will be plenty.
Oh, yeah. Anything 6 cores or less, well, barring 8700K, but like 8700 and down or 2600X and down.
Yeah. Without
honestly, yeah. I mean, if I had a 2700, I'd be going for more cooling, but yeah. Yeah, this thing's very solid, man. $17, this thing's a steal.
Oops. All right, so my next deal, we had a deal a couple of weeks ago, or well, it actually been 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point, for an ASRock B350 Pro 4 motherboard, which was a solid deal at $65. Well, now you can get the updated version of that, the ASRock B450 Pro 4, also at $65 after a $15 rebate. This is a full ATX board that supports up to the Ryzen 7 2700X, although given it has a 4-phase VRM, I wouldn't recommend it.
Well, you know what would be a fun project? Get this board, get a 2400G. You can get the delitting tool on Mod by Mods, their Bowers delitting tool. It's $100, but you delit the 2400G, put some liquid metal on it, get this board, get the, I know you're going to go over the RAM kit deal here, but get that RAM kit deal. And all in all, right around $600, you've got an interesting overclocking build, I think.
All without a discrete GPU, meaning that you have the room to add one later if you want it.
Yeah.
Because the Ryzen 5 2400G, with its built-in Vega GPU, performs right around, it's between a GT 1030 and a GTX 1050.
Yeah, and on this board, it would do really well, actually. Well, let me pull this board up. I don't know what kind of I/O it's got.
Well, just a second. Let's see. So I/O looks like 4 USB 3.0 A ports, a USB 3.0 C port. You've got good old-fashioned VGA connector, HDMI and display port, RJ45 jack for your gigabit Ethernet, a PS2 port. That's old school.
Well, you've got HDMI and display port. So
yeah.
You can run a dual monitor if you want to.
Exactly.
Man, if I had $1,000 just laying around, I'd definitely pull it. Yeah.
And you were mentioning the RAM kit deal.
Mm-hmm.
So the RAM kit deal we are talking about is for this Ripjaws 5 16 gig kit from G.Skill. It is DDR4 3200. Now, it is an older kit that was originally certified with Z170, but this will work with Ryzen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty solid kit. It's latency 16 with 16, 18, 18, 38 timings, but those can be tightened up.
Well, and if if the red doesn't fit your color scheme, you can also get the black at the same price, I think.
Yes, the black is the same price. So if you were going to get the ASRock board, you might want to get the black RAM DIMMs just for aesthetic purposes.
Right.
Same performance, though. Notice both use a black PCB.
And I've been using G-Skill in all my builds for the past year, which is around 5 or 6 now, I think. And it's been extremely solid RAM. You just load up the profile and boom, you're done. Solid as a rock performance.
Yep. Well, if you do like a splash of red in your system, or you have a red color scheme going on, and you're looking for a solid 1080p GPU, then this MSI Radeon RX 578 gig, it is the Armor Cooler, but you'll notice it's the MK2 designation, meaning this was part of their Mech 2 branding. So they went with they took the Armor Cooler and they dressed it up in red, because it's normally white. But right now, you can pick up this RX 570. You'll notice it's on sale for $174, but you can get a $15 rebate on it to bring it down to $160. But there's also a promo code, which actually, let me bring that up real quick. There is a promo code right here for this GPU that takes an extra $5 off, so that the total price is $154.99 after your rebate. So you're getting an RX 578 gig for $155.
Which, let me tell you, the latest AMD driver with that fan curve and the Wattman tool, that is a godsend right now.
And notice also, it comes with 2 free games. If we take a look at this AMD gift here, notice you get your choice of redeemable download codes from any 2 of Tom Clancy's The Division 2, Resident Evil 2, the remake that they're making of that on a modern engine, and Devil May Cry 5.
Oh, it's got the Resident Evil 2 remake. Oh, I really want to get that one.
If it were me, I would get the Division 2 and Resident Evil 2, because I played the original Division for a while, and that was, even with all of its problems, it was a fun game.
Was it?
Yeah. It was a nice, grindy RPG shooter. It did have some problems, particularly in end gameplay. But yeah, solid graphics card. You get 2 free games with it, and you can get it on sale for $155 right now.
Nice.
So with what we've shown you here, you could get the GAMX cooler. Deal I didn't mention. I believe right now on Amazon you can get the R7 1700X for $159. And even if you can't, you can get the Ryzen 5 2600 for $165. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick.
So you get a decent case, power supply. Right around $700, you can get a really solid 1080p gaming machine with 8 cores and 16 threads, 16 gigs of RAM. I haven't used. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but I'm guessing.
Yeah, apparently that deal is over for the 1700X, but you can still get the Ryzen 5 2600 for $165 from Amazon.
Yeah, with the GAMX cooler, you can overclock it. You can overclock it all core to right around 4 gigahertz, I want to say. And if you have a good one, like you won the silicone lottery, you can probably do 4.1, 4.2.
Yeah, there's the Ryzen 5 2600. You can get it for $165. It comes with the Race Stealth cooler, but if you wanted to get that GAMX cooler, you would get superior cooling for only $70 more. You have a motherboard, you have RAM, you have a graphics card, you have a solid foundation for a mid-range 1080p gaming machine for what? 165 plus 155 is around 320, plus another 120 for the G-Skill RAM is 440. $65 for the ASRock board is 505, plus 17 for the GAMX cooler. That puts it right around $522.
Jeez.
So throw in a case.
Well,
Let's say you find a cheap.
Yeah, add about $200, for a 512 gig SSD, the case, and a power supply.
Yeah. So easy $600, $750 mid-range gaming PC.
Very good gaming PC. That thing will last you for at least 3 years.
And you'd have a solid upgrade path.
Mm-hmm.
If you find the Ryzen 5 2600 is too restrictive, you can always jump up to the Ryzen 7 2700.
Yeah, as long as you're not really overclocking it.
Right. You would probably be limited to stock clocks. But even still.
Actually, what you could do is you could save your pennies and get a monoblock where you take the VRM off and you cover the VRM area and the CPU with a water cooling block. Oh, yeah. Now you're getting into some modding really right there. Yeah, if you water cooled, if you got a monoblock that fit, you could water cool the VRM and the CPU. You're fine. You could, yeah, okay, 2700X, no problem.
Yeah, that might be a bit of a tall order, but regardless. Jason, do you have anything else to add? Because I think we have reached the end of our assigned topics.
Honestly, we've covered everything and then some tonight. It's been a really fun podcast. I don't know. I don't really have anything to add. I know I've been promising YouTube videos and I've got them on my SSD. I have a blank channel right now. And I'm about to go through some hard tubing for the first time. It's one of my PETGs right here.
Nice.
And I got paranoid this morning and I ordered some more.
Just in case.
My 2 rads. Just waiting on the GPU block. That's about it. And I'm told it'll be arriving in the US around next week sometime, and I upgraded it to overnight. So, and I bought 6 more PETG tubes because I know I'm going to probably mess up. Yeah, I don't know. Got my heat gun right here. So
looks like you got a fun time ahead of you.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. I got my cryofuel coolant sitting around here somewhere.
Good stuff.
So yeah. And then I will be absolutely done, unfortunately, with my 2700X. And then I'm sending the... So I'm sending my 2 Noctua 3000 RPM fans to you, and then my Kraken to Hunter. And then, yeah.
Yeah, sadly, Hunter could not join us this evening as he has the crud.
Which is I guess that's like a Protoss cold?
I guess so. I mean... Oh, we're just getting silly at this point.
Yeah.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed the content you've seen here, of course, you can always find us every week, barring holidays, of course, with your tech news for the week. You can also find other great content here on CrossForge Gaming from all of our contributors. You can check out our Twitch channel to see us 5 nights a week as we live stream games and other content. And of course, we thank you for sticking with us for this entire time and watching. So, I've been Dynamo Ned. This has been TechForge. And remember, when life has you down, Jesus loves you, and forge on.
Forge on, Mr. Ned and Jesus.